YouTube later on. And yes, so hi, good evening. I'm Karishma from the Tech Container team. Thanks a lot for joining us today. So, to give you a little bit of context about Tech Container, can everyone just mute yourself? That all right? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so to give you a little bit of context about Tech Container, we've been using this platform to share knowledge on upcoming trends, with this being our 20th meetup. Now, moving on to the session plan for the day, to take us through mobile app security best practices, I take immense pleasure in introducing our speakers, Indranil and Nitish. Our speaker, Indranil, is a staff engineer at Navis. He has worked in companies like AT&T and Cisco. He has over 11 years of experience and is mostly into design and development of middleware, microservices, cloud solutions, cross-platform apps, blogging, and is constantly exploring new things in app. He's a great cook as well. And our speaker Nitish completed BTech in IT from SN College of Engineering in 2019. He joined Navis fresh out of college and has been working here for almost 2 years now as a software developer for the mobile suite team. His primary focus is on developing cross-platform mobile applications using React Native and also has experience in working with JavaScript, TypeScript, ES6, and other React Native, and JavaScript frameworks. So thanks a lot for being here, Nidhal and Nitish. Over to you now.
Thanks, Karishma. Am I audible?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tech Container. In this installment of Tech Container, we will be talking about mobile app security and related best practices. Most of what we will discuss today is from our own experience within our organization while building mobile apps from scratch, right? We go to the
Internet, we having trouble hearing you now.
Is it better now?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sure. So all of you must be aware of that Fortnite fake that happened a couple of years back, right? It's a classic example of reverse engineering hack. So just in case you are not aware, Fortnite is a famous RPG game on App Store for iPhones, right? They released a beta version somewhere in 2018, and you could only join then via invite. This caused a massive fake app proliferation. A lot of fake apps mimicking the actual Fortnite app started propping up, mostly on Android, where the game was not even available. And these fakes deeply resembled the actual Fortnite screens, the background music, and certain other features. Some of this malware tracked your keystrokes in your mobile keyboard. Some even went on to mine cryptocurrency using CoinHive framework. Can you imagine that? Soon enough, Epic Games, the company which built Fortnite, had to actually release an official statement on this to arrest the spread of fake apps in the name of Fortnite. So it was quite a news at that time. Anyway, a recent data shows that still as many as 65,000 active fake apps are there in various application stores, especially for mobile apps. If you skim through the news, a lot of data breach, messenger snooping gets reported frequently. Like, for example, the MobiKwik data breach, the ongoing iOS WhatsApp messenger leaks, and many others. You just have to go through the news. I mean, daily there are news on these kind of breaches and malwares. So with regard to all this, it is inherent that we as developers have a massive role in identifying potential risks upfront, fixing them as soon as possible, and learning from mistakes so that we can stop them from happening in future. Also remember that the malware community is not static. They get smart and innovative to find new loopholes as soon as we plug one. Today, with the huge adoption of mobile apps, a serious question that we all should ponder on: is your mobile app secure? Now, to better answer this question, first we must understand what can go wrong. A quick Google search will reveal that most of the well-known cybersecurity organizations and researchers point lack of strong or multi-factor authentication, failure to encrypt properly, reverse engineering, malicious code injection, and insecure data storage and license litigations as prominent failures, which can lead to large-scale security liabilities for your business and your users. Can we move on to the next slide? So as a developer and as a team, there are a handful of best practices that we crafted from our experience, which can be employed to build our app in the right way, leaving as less as to chance when it comes to security. I'll skim through 5 best practices.
Indranil, we can't hear you anymore.
Okay, looks like he's having some connection trouble. Maybe we can give him a couple more seconds.
Yeah, sure. I'll try messaging him as well. I'll just try messaging him as well.
Yeah, sure.
Am I audible?
Oh, okay, you're back. Yeah, we can hear you.
Till when did we go?
Just the starting of the slide.
Starting of the slide. Okay. I'm sorry. I'll then go over, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. So in slide 3, we are going to tackle 5 well-known best practices that we follow in our organization to build our app, which can be employed to build our app right, leaving as less as to chance when it comes to security, right? So I'll skim through these 5 topics at a very high level, and then my colleague Nitish will do a deep dive with demo for each. Okay. The first thing being the dependency vulnerability check. So today, when we build an app, we do not write the entire code. We depend on a lot of third-party libraries, which makes a big chunk of what we build or what we offer via our apps. Package managers like npm, which we use, already comes with inbuilt audit checks, which reports about outdated packages, known security issues of any dependencies. Apart from these tools, there are tools like Black Duck, Sync, which also helps in detecting security and operational issues, as well as making sure your deep dependencies complies with your organization's third-party licensing requirements. You definitely do not want your organization or your app to become something like Oracle versus Google API usage litigation war on Android. So next is code obfuscation. I already talked about the Fortnite example in the previous slide on what reverse engineering can do, what reverse engineering hack can do. Deploying countermeasures to obfuscate your code can go a long way protecting your app, your intellectual property, and copyrights. The next one is, okay, so according to Symantec, around 13% of consumer devices and more than 10% of enterprise devices do not have encryption enabled. This means that if hackers gain access to these devices, personal data will be available in plain text. So if your app is storing data in these devices, it can lead to security vulnerability and can have severe consequences like user session token theft, data theft, privacy violations, and many other things. So it is apparent that as an app developer, you should intend to encrypt your entire app data without relying on the device integrity as much, especially when it comes to user session info like credentials and tokens. You must use underlying platform key stores and keychains to keep it safe. Using SSL in your transport and designing your backend APIs which do not give out a lot of information in the URL is highly advised. Even for the last point, when we are talking about compromised devices like jailbroken or rooted devices, they pose a serious threat to your app security. So if your target users or business allows you to completely disable installation and operation of your app in such devices, you should opt so. In scenarios where it is not possible, you should use tools like MobSF to test malicious code injection scenarios as much as possible. So as you can see, these 5 things that we are already following in our app development, in our app delivery. So I will hand it over to my colleague Nitish, who will now go through each of these 5 points, deep dive, and show you demos on how to implement and how we are doing it. Over to you, Nitish.
Yeah, thanks, Anand. So hey guys, so we kind of have like a recorded demo that we have here that kind of showcases how to do things in terms of the 3 different phases in your development cycle, like at the time when you start to code, at the time when you compile your code, and after the final artifact is built. So so this kind of entails like how we can do code obfuscation and enable shrinking and things like that, which talks about things that happens during compile time, and using tools like MobSF to do some kind of security testing which happens after the artifacts are built, and in terms of npm audits or dependency vulnerability checks using Black Duck or Sync, which happens before even like the development is completely done. So quickly moving on. So here I have like a sample cross-platform application developed using React Native. So first, we will be beginning by taking a look at how to set up ProGuard, which handles obfuscation, enables shrinking, and how to secure the data used by our apps in the local DBs. So right now, I'm trying to show how to enable which files to edit to enable the ProGuard. So as you can see in this particular app, version 1 of the app, we have a very limited set of permissions used. So this is kind of like the first step that you have to take into account when you're starting to develop apps, because your app should not have any permissions that are not necessary for the operations for your app. If your app only needs some permissions, that's the only time when you should add these permissions. Rest of the permissions that are not necessary for the app's operation should be removed. So that's the first thing that you can do. And then the second thing is like to enable ProGuard, which is like the obfuscation tool given by Android by default. You can add this enable ProGuard in release builds as true. And of course, in this example, it's false. So I'm just going to showcase the difference between how your app looks like when there is no ProGuard and when there is ProGuard. And of course, these are like the dependencies of the app. And once again, all the information about these packages, like in terms of vulnerabilities and things like that, are reported by NPM audits. But you can also use tools like Sync to identify outdated packages or packages with vulnerabilities. Now moving on to like the second version of the app, which has the ProGuard enabled. So you can see, just for like a sample, in this particular app, I have added some extra permissions which are not needed. So obviously this is bad practice. So these particular permissions are not needed by the app, but we are still adding them. So the ideal use case will be to remove these. And second, moving on to the build.gradle file, where you can enable shrinking by setting the shrink resources variable to true, and then by setting enable ProGuard reduce builds to true. So once you have ProGuard enabled, you need to set up something called as ProGuard rules. So essentially, the idea behind ProGuard is like you minify the file. So there are some packages or dependencies that your app might use that has some classes that should not be minified. So in such case, you can use this ProGuard rules file to indicate that these so and so classes should not be minified. In our particular example, we have some React Native dependencies which should not be minified, so those are added in this ProGuard rules file. And moving on to the packages. So here you can see I'm also introducing a new DB called as Realm. So as Internal mentioned, it's also important to encrypt all the data that is used by our app, which is stored locally in the mobile device. So this ensures that even though our device integrity is compromised, we can still we still have a last line of defense in terms of the data itself being encrypted and not being in plain text. So Realm is one such DB that helps us do this by default. I'll also showcase how that looks like. No way. So now moving on, so now I'll be showcasing like the build APKs. So here you can see there are like two APKs, V1 and V2. So the V1 has does not have ProGuard, and V2 has ProGuard enabled. So we'll look at how the APK looks after decompiling it using Android Studio. So you can do that by using the profile APK option in Android Studio. So right now I'm just decompiling the V1 APK, and you can see this is like the contents of the APK file. So if you look at classes.dex in particular, class.dex in particular, which will have like the actual most of the source code, and lib will be like from whatever dependencies you have. And then the index.Android bundle is like from React Native itself. If you look at the kind of files in terms of like the Java classes and things, you can see like none of the namespaces are obfuscated. All the files are like in their full path. We can clearly identify what kind of dependency these apps have, and even look at the source code of these apps without much effort, since there is no ProGuard enabled. As you can see, like you're reading through the actual code here, which is disassembled just by using Android Studio. Now quickly opening V2 app, which has ProGuard enabled. So immediately you can see the difference here, that the file names are starting to get obfuscated here. So which is going to add one layer of security in terms of making it harder for people to reverse engineer, since like the namespaces are now like just very random and not user readable as much. You can see some of the code inside is also obfuscated here. So all this just by using the default ProGuard given by Android. The other thing that I would like to showcase is like, since I'm also including the cross-platform application development, in this case it's React Native. So we also have most of our application logic is not in the like the native Android or iOS code, but in the JS code. So it also becomes important for us to kind of obfuscate or minify that code also. So in this case, to show how the Android index.bundle file looks like, I'll move into assets folder and open this file in like a txt editor. As you can see, like this code has some amount of modification, but not as much as like the native Android code. You can still see some symbols are like transformed, but not all. You can still see like proper variable names and things like that. So which is not kind of good enough if you want to like completely secure a app. Like for example, you can see like actual variable names here. In order to avoid this, React Native provides another feature. So this is called React Native allows us to use another JavaScript engine called Hermes. So this JavaScript engine helps us to convert this compiled JavaScript, I mean the index.android.bundle JavaScript code into actual bytecode instead of the JavaScript itself, which is just minified. So this is how that looks like. In case if you use the Hermes engine, by default, React Native itself converts your JavaScript code also to bytecode, which is like compiled code, which you cannot read by opening it like this. So to show how that is added, I'm moving into the project build.gradle file, and there'll be another variable up top called enable Hermes. You can make this to true. Of course, this is specific to a React Native project, and you won't find this in like normal Android, Java, or Kotlin projects. But in case of React Native, you have this feature and you can make use of that. So as I mentioned, like Hermes is not the only option to perform this kind of obfuscation. There are also other JavaScript obfuscation tools. So like for example, there is this JavaScript obfuscator, which has like a wrapper around for React Native. So essentially what these projects kind of do is like they use the Babel transpiler to kind of obfuscate. As you can see here, it uses some of the dependencies from Babel to perform this obfuscation. But the one thing that I have found with respect to these kind of obfuscators is that they're not really that reliable, and they're not really that guaranteed to work. As you can see, like here, most people just report some random errors during the compile process, like the app crashes or whatnot. So we have not really explored on this, but it is something that you can take a look at in if you're like seriously considering obfuscating the JavaScript code. Also, there are also other paid tools like JScrambler is a good example. So from what we have seen, JScrambler does a much better job compared to JavaScript obfuscator. So, and they claim that the outcome is also much harder to reverse engineer, but of course, we have not yet explored these claims yet. Just quickly showing how the JScrambler outputs look like. So as you can see, you can on the right hand side, you can see like a list of possible obfuscation techniques that you can have. They have like a wide range of techniques which you can choose from. And but yeah, the catch is like this is paid. So this is in terms of obfuscation, minification, and things like that, which is like going to be like the first line. So quickly moving on to the next part, which is related to the app data encryption. So to show that using Realm allows us to encrypt the data, I'll be connecting to the local device and opening the device file explorer here. So before that, quickly opening the app and loading some sample data. Once you have the data loaded, you can go to the particular emulator's device file explorer and open the actual Realm DB here. So this is technically what a person who would like to look at the data will try to do. So if they have understood it, they can, it's as simple as like connecting your emulator, installing the app in the emulator, and opening up this particular location. So that is why it's very important for us to, kind of encrypt all the local data in the app. So you can see the realm DB file. So this is like the DB file that's stored in the actual device, mobile device. So if I just quickly open it for showcasing, like by default, this is encrypted completely. So realm supports AES encryption. So by default, which like implemented by the OS itself. So like you can easily leverage a DB like realm to automatically encrypt all your storage. For more sensitive data, like such that you can divide data into like two kinds. So operational data, which is required for like the main usage of the app, and there's another level of data like which is more sensitive, like for example access tokens, API keys, and things like that. So our recommendation would be to like kind of segregate these two and not combine them in the same DB, so that you can add even another layer of protection. So like for example, you don't have to store use such kind of local DBs to store very sensitive informations like access tokens, for example. So for this, the Android and iOS OSs itself provide like certain secure storages. So these are called keychains in iOS and key stores in Android. So we can also leverage those storages to store more sensitive data. So in this example, your key store data will be stored under this shared prefs folder. But again, based on like whatever app you're developing, the ways to access this shared preference in terms of key store or keychain is different. Like if you're developing a native Android app, there'll be particular APIs in the actual framework itself to access those. But since we are currently showcasing a React Native app, we have certain wrappers around to directly access those stores. So here we are using Redux versus sensitive storage to do that. So this library that helps us access the keychain and key store directly from the JS layer. So the advantage of using the keychain and key store is like it is the most secure storage provided by the respective OSs, and the other advantage is that unlike the normal DBs, anything that you store in these kind of DBs are like encrypted by default. So like for example, now you can see like in this code I have like hard coded some API or token, but in terms of when I store it into the key store or keychain using the wrappers for the key provided by React Native, you can see that it will automatically be encrypted right here. It's under the shared prefs. So that's an advantage of using keychain and key store. So moving on, the next part that we kind of have to discuss about is like in terms of detecting root and detecting jailbroken devices. So so the idea behind these kind of runtime protection tactics is like to detect the device integrity. So essentially these programs run based on like few heuristics that kind of define with a certain probability what a jailbroken device would look like. So what I mean by that is like it's not 100% certain that if the program provided by this particular library says like the device is jailbroken, it's not 100% certain that it will be jailbroken. It's based on a few heuristics that are like most commonly observed in jailbroken devices. So that it is what it is. So we have to take that with a grain of salt. So for example, I'll show what kind of checks an example of this library do. So I'm currently looking at JailMonkey, which is like a very popular JavaScript based root detection library. So you can see essentially all they have is like this one check root method, which is checking for whether these paths exist in your emulator or device or not. So the idea is that if your device is rooted or jailbroken, your particular user on the device in the Linux kernel will have these paths. So using that as a heuristic, this particular library is just detecting whether these paths exist or not, and if these paths exist, it returns true. Of course, there is like a much bigger collection of such Android root detection techniques. This particular article that I have opened up right now has like a collection of a bunch of them, like based on what other softwares like MDMs use to detect roots. And just with general knowledge of like the Android Linux kernel, you can also create some heuristics to identify roots if you have like a much uh, greater requirement for that. So essentially, you can see like checking for more such kind of paths, whether you have permissions, super user permissions, things like that. And moving on, there is also another package called rootbeer. So just like how JailMonkey is for like JavaScript or cross-platform based projects, so rootbeer is like you can directly use it in the native app itself. So it has a much wider collection of root checks compared to JailMonkey, and it's a bit more adopted also, since it's like directly from the native checks. And there's one thing that I liked about this particular package is that they have a good disclaimer that explains uh, how we should take this root detection. So you can see root is equal to God. So like there's no 100% way to check for root. So that's something that we need to keep in mind in terms of all of these security practices. So they should be one step, but not the final step. There are also other kinds of check with respect to Android that is provided by the Google APIs itself. So one such very interesting development that happened recently is with regards to something called as safety net. So the safety net is like a service provided by Google. So, it provides a set of services and APIs that help protect your app against security threats, like essentially things like device tampering, bad URLs, potentially harmful apps, fake users, etc. So they basically have like a collection of such already known such uh, compromised device list based on which like they can compare our device environment details and say with some certainty that your device integrity may be compromised. So the way it kind of works is like it's essentially an API. So what the input to the API is like you capture the device's software and hardware environment details, and you pass it to Google's safety net service via an in-app API call. So all this happens after your app is booted, and then the service then returns a signed attestation of the device's assessment. So this assessment tells you whether like whether you can trust this device, whether it's having some malicious code in that or things like that. Uh, and using that, you can also prevent your app from even running further in case of the device integrity is compromised. And the one thing to remember here is like as I mentioned, this is a service. So I think there is some limit on like how many number of free calls that you can make, and beyond which there is some pricing involved. But yeah, but we need to check there's some API quota, and yeah, we need to check into the documents for more info. Next, we move on to the static and dynamic analysis parts. So as Indranil mentioned, so MobSF is one such tool that we found out, actually one of the best tools that we found out for this. It allows us to perform a wide variety of things like malware analysis, pen testing, and even a complete security assessment in terms of like security scores with respect to um, OWASP security guidelines, uh, things like that. So the OWASP mobile security project is like a centralized resource intended to give developers and security teams the resources that they kind of need, uh, to build and maintain secure mobile apps. So essentially, their aim is like to catalog the various possible mobile security vulnerabilities. Like they have a list of things that we need to look out for when we develop apps, and this lists help teams to identify and tackle these issues right from the development phase. What this MobSF does is like it builds on top of those OWASP projects like Top 10, MASVS, MSTG, things like that. So these projects provide some heuristics. So MobSF takes these heuristics and runs them in your binaries like the APK, AB, or IPF file, and performs both static and dynamic analysis. The installation is pretty simple. It's essentially a Python app. You can just clone the project and run the setup bat in case you have Windows machine. Once you have done that, you should have a run.bat file. Running that will boot up the MobSF instance. By default, I think it's port 80,000. The interesting thing about MobSF is like MobSF also has like a REST client. So if you go to the API docs, you can see like some list of 8 APIs that MobSF provides. So essentially, this is like all the features with respect to static analysis provided by MobSF. So you can see like you can upload an APK, perform a scan, download a PDF report, things like that. So all these are provided as REST API also. But of course, you can also use the UI, GUI also. Right now, I'm just trying to scan the V1 APK. So once it's scanned and analyzed, you can move to you'll be taken to the static analysis screen where you get like various things about the app, like the permissions used, code inspection, network security, things like that. So essentially, the idea here is like this report kind of outlines where your app does things right in terms of following the OWASP guidelines, and where your app does things wrong. So if you have certain things that you need to look at in terms of the OWASP standards, you will see them with severity high or with warning. Like in this particular example, the V1 version of our app uses SQLite, and according to the OWASP guidelines, you can see like untrusted user input in raw SQL queries can cause SQL injection. So this is listed as a high risk in OWASP top 10. So it's flagged as a high severity here in MobSF static analysis. So once you take a look at this report, you can clearly identify that this is something that we need to work on, and probably you can think about moving to a different DB, or even consider sanitizing your input. So that's with respect to the static analysis. Quickly uploading the V2 version also for comparison. And here, yeah, you can see since in V2 we moved away from the SQLite, and we no longer use non-encrypted DB. You can see that particular issue is resolved. So this is kind of a workflow that you guys can have in terms of running static analysis regularly on your artifacts in order to identify OWASP related issues and kind of resolve it. You can also create a PDF report of this particular web page, so which kind of highlights your overall security score, essentially all the things that you saw in the screen there. It provides like a complete report of what all entails in your APK. Moving on to the dynamic analysis part. So this dynamic analysis tool can be used by us to do all kinds of testings. Even things like pen testing can be done using this. So in order to enable this, first you need to start up your emulator. Once your emulator is up and running, you can go to the dynamic analysis tab and click on the MobSFI button here. So once it's successfully done, you can start the dynamic analysis using the green button there in terms of which APK you want. So once you select a particular APK from here, that APK will be installed, and the dynamic analysis run will be started. In terms of how MobSF allows us to do the dynamic analysis, is by using something called as FIDA. So FIDA is like a dynamic instrumentation framework used for injecting your own scripts into the app. So essentially, it allows us to add hooks on top of the app layer, so that we can run our own custom code and kind of help reverse engineer the code. You can see there are lots of options here, like tracing class methods, and there are also some FIDA scripts in default scripts provided, like for example file trace, JNI trace, JNI hook, input stream dump. So input stream dump might be useful if you want to read some DB things. So there are some available predefined available scripts, but you can also write your own scripts. So for demo, I'll be selecting few scripts here and loading them. Once I've loaded the scripts, I can click on start into instrumentation here. This will open up, this will install the app and start up FIDA, and this start recording FIDA logs here. So essentially now I need, in order to perform the dynamic analysis, I will start using the app like a regular user here. So like I can refresh, I can add a new to do, things like that. So as and when some operation on the app happens, the hooks added by FIDA based on whatever hook we are adding, so those kind of information as logs will be printed here. So like in this example, you can see like there are some API calls that were made. So you can see some HTTP network calls. You can also some writes to the DB here. So all these are given as logs, but since we have used some encrypted storage, you cannot see those data as clearly as it was if you have used the V1 app where nothing's encrypted. And of course there are you can also add hooks to like native APIs if you feel like you wanted to pen test that too. Moving on, you can also add like logcat streams or live API monitor. So this live API monitor is an other way of looking at like the native API calls. Like for example, you can see you can track the last method called in the native API classes, like for example basic for cipher, message digest, things like that. So you can see like what was the last method that was called, the arguments passed, the results, things like that. So all these as a collection can be used at the end of the day to kind of reverse engineer the the flow in your app, and it can also help us identify points with where we need to make it more secure. Like for example, you can see like most of these results here are like either obfuscated or encrypted. So all these are kind of like the pluses of doing adding obfuscation, adding encrypted DB and things like that. In terms of React Native apps, you won't get much with respect to start activity tested because like there's only one activity by default. Most of the code is in JS, but if you have like a native app, probably start activity tester will help more. And once you're kind of done with your dynamic analysis, you can use the generate report button, which gives a similar interface to the static analysis that we saw before, except it just collects the outputs of the various logs that we saw, like the FIDA log, the API inspector, things like that. And of course, you can also download and print. Yep. So I guess that kind of covers the demo that we had.
Yeah. Any questions? So one thing I would like to mention is that whatever we showcased, there is a active effort to either integrate all of this with our CI/CD pipeline. Either it's done or it's in progress. The reason being is if you have like 5 or 10 best practices, and if you cannot cover your builds with that, and if you do it optionally, it does not make sense. So whatever best practices that you come up with, you feel is good for your app, for your organization, and if you have a CI/CD strategy, it makes sense that you take time to integrate that CI/CD, or get these best practices integrated into your CI/CD strategy. That is a very important thing from the perspective that you need to make sure that every build that goes out is checked thoroughly without having manual intervention. Yep.
I see a few questions from Gaurav, so probably can take a shot at them. So, okay, so the first question is like SQLite DBs can be encrypted too. So was that option explored? Yes. So essentially, again, this is going to be case by case basis. So the way that we looked at it is like we had a cross-platform app which does not have. We did not want to touch the native code as much. So that was like the whole point of us choosing cross-platform apps. So in terms of trying to encrypt this SQLite DB from the JS layer is going to be harder for us. So that was one of the main reasons why we did not go with trying to encrypt the SQLite DB itself. Rather utilize some inbuilt functions provided by other DBs, like the best DB that we found was Realm for this use case. So essentially we're just trying to offload that work to the existing libraries. Yeah, but so what I'm trying to say is like it's going to be case by case basis. In terms of native apps, I guess this could be the better option in terms of speed, performance, things like that.
Yeah, and also please remember that whenever you're using encryption, be careful about it, because when your app ends up in I mean, if it ends up in countries where there are strict laws on encryption, you can face litigation. So you need to be very careful. You need to make sure you know your audience, you know where your app is ending up, and you need to make sure that the encryptions that you are using are in line with the rules and regulations of that particular country or region.
Yep. Okay, let's look at the second question. What all things to take care of while designing mobile API frontend, mobile app frontend, so that it is not easy to fake it?
So this is that reverse engineering question, I think, right?
Yes, yeah, kind of actually. But basically, so you said that sometimes we have this lot of other apps which looks like as of real app. So only thing is like the person who is downloading the app from the app store, they have to look for who is the author of the app and all those things. But let's say some person make mistake in that and they by mistake download thinking, okay, this is the Navis app because it look and feel is same, and then they kind of give out the entire information. So how do you do your design such that it cannot be done, or what all things you keep in mind?
I guess if we have to be honest, like it's going to be very hard to prevent people from doing that, because at the end of the day, you can still make very minute changes, just enough to ensure that you don't even uh, uh, you don't even get into legal trouble for doing that. So
Okay, so do you
yeah.
like do you put your logos there or something like that, and when someone uses your thing like fake apps kind of do you try to go through the app store,
Yep.
see whether there are fake apps and just try to just take it out? Yeah.
That's right. So essentially, in terms of like having apps that can be installed via App Store and Play Store, like the official streams, the advantage there is like you can easily check who's the developer. So it should be very easy for you to check whether it's coming from a developer, the source who you know, and not some random developer. So that information is like can be easily seen from the download page of the app itself. And then the other thing is like I think you also mentioned, so branding is also like important. So
Yeah, communication is very important. So when you are say if you take the example of Fortnite only, right? I think one of the biggest challenges they face is communication, because they put out the beta in a grand way and say invite only and all that. There was a lot of expectation and all that. And a lot of people wanted to get hold of Fortnite, right? And there was a lot of expectation that was built up. As a result, because the expectation was not properly handled, the communication was not done properly, it was easy for scammers and hackers to actually come up, do reverse engineering, get as much as of the features that is required for people to kind of click the install button. See, the thing is there. To be honest, both App Store and Play Store do kind of their best to prevent this kind of scam apps and all those things. But we know, right? As I said, like even today, there are around active 65,000 apps that are tracked by research organizations, cybersecurity research organizations, which are either fake or fall into that category in one way or the other, right? So it's not always possible for both App Store and Play Store to kind of go to that level and do it. It's very same to as how YouTube kind of goes through videos and all that, right? So yeah, I mean, communication and branding is very important, so that people know that okay, if I'm installing it, I need to make sure that this is coming from this person. I know that I can click a link and go to this website, this company's website. So that's very important. And as a developer, what you can do is obviously, as Nitish said, right, use ProGuard, use I mean, in future more elaborate and fantastic options will be available to even further obfuscate your code and your resources. Please use that, encrypt as much of your data as possible so that they cannot be read and faked in the fake malware. So these are the things you can do as a developer. Rest of it comes down to branding and communication.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks, Gaurav. Thank you for the questions.
Okay. So Karishma, if there are no further questions, I think
Yeah,
you
sure.
can
We
take
can.
over.
Yeah, we can wrap up then. So thank you so much for the session, Indran and Nitish, and for everyone who joined our session today. I really hope you enjoyed it as well. This session will also be uploaded on our YouTube channel. So thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Karishma. Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys. Thanks for attending.
Yeah,
Thank
the
you.
Tech Container team for taking the initiative to do this. Bye.
Bye bye. Yeah.